Love Live Bluebird is the latest project to be announced in the series, and those looking at it from a quick glance may be slightly confused. There's no anime, there's no official type of content they're producing, it's kind of all over the place. We have characters, we have songs, and we have Twitter. Every character has their own Twitter account, and that's how I've been learning who these characters are and the setting it takes place in. Even in their first introductory livestream, not much information was really shown on what they're doing. For those that have been following Love Live for the past few years, this may not come off as the biggest surprise. Love Live has been pretty experimental with the way they pump out new groups. Nijigasaki for reasons I've stated pretty often on this channel, and Hasunosora with how it uses an app for a majority of its content. There is one major difference with Bluebird that currently separates it from the others in terms of how stable it is. Nijigasaki was built up very slowly, having Squaddle Festival as a base to fall on in case things got bad. They got mini stories, they got cards, they had a fallout plan. And as they grew, they eventually got their own game and anime and stuff. With Hasunosora, they had an entire app for themselves. You can talk about localization, language barriers, but in terms of content, man, you're filled. You literally get frequent live streams, and you also have the rhythm game and the frequent story updates in real time. This is a constant flow of information. Now let's take a look at Bluebird. Do you like Twitter tweets? Yeah, we're pretty limited on the content. We still get the music and the live streams, but you can't deny that seems like for Bluebird, it feels very budgeted. I won't say downgraded because that's more subjective, but there's definitely less to consume compared to other groups. Even Nijigasaki had those 4 Chroma comics to fill the time before All Stars came out. Bluebird doesn't have a safety net, something it can rely on for some source of comfort or added protection. Think about it. If you were not someone who was readily able to engage with Love Live content, there were still aspects you can join in. The anime, the games, Aqours had Sif, Nijigasaki had Sif. Even Liela had Sif, even if it was poorly incorporated. Some of us have lives and aren't able to keep up with the live form content, and that's in no way a negative thing. It just puts more focus on the type of content that doesn't require you to jump hoops. But that depends on why you're a fan to begin with, which is something I've realized when talking about Love Live fans. Being a part of the Love Live fanbase on all platforms has made me realize how a large majority really want something they can easily engage with. Perhaps a rhythm game that they can play and read the story and like the characters and the outfits and stuff and get invested. But again, depends on what you're in Love Live for. I don't blame anyone for not being able to keep up with news and streams all around social media. I know for a fact I'll do it, but that doesn't mean I won't send condolences to those that can't. If I took a shot every time an old fan mentioned bringing back the anime or games, I'd think I'd make another Hasunosora video. And the reason I bring that up is because Bluebird taking place primarily on Twitter heightens the issues I mentioned. It seems scattered, unfocused. Are we seriously using a website where I can't even bookmark a post unless I refresh my page 20 times? It seems lost. But is it really? I'm not a professional multimedia company that has to manage multiple groups at a time, but I doubt they're just seriously throwing darts on the board and hoping for the best. These types of operations have plans, and I think Love Live Bluebird does indeed have a plan, and it may be its own way of paying respects to its origins to when the franchise started in 2010. This is going to require pushing back our noggins back over a decade to a time where Love Live didn't have an anime, didn't have games, or even good music. Wait. I've actually had the Bluebird video in the works for a while, and it was going to be on this visual identity. Since Bluebird takes place at an online school, the visuals and entire aesthetic is based on the internet. Web design, graphics. I was going to wait until more music videos popped up to really talk about it, but then after their first livestream, I saw this tweet. Between the minimal activities, limited content avenues, and direct involvement of Sakurako Kimino, it really feels like they're trying to recapture the magic of 2010 Love Live Squaddle project. Sakurako Kimino. If you don't know that name, then don't worry, I didn't either, and you probably wouldn't know because of how obscure she is. For those unaware, she is the original creator of Love Live. Love Live is a very convoluted series, as it was a very multi-effort job with a ton of people being responsible for the creation of it. But she stands as one of the more known ones. She wrote the manga, books, inspiration for some songs, and is credited as original plan/concept for every Love Live anime, implying that she's the originator of it. She's essentially the mother of this series. Her credits aren't fully defined, as pretty much no information is found on her, not even her face. Checking the wiki though, most of her credits are in the Muse and Aqours era, and that makes sense. I'd reasonably assume that after a while, she'd get tired and, I don't know, relax, take a break. Write some Yuri. I bring her name up though because a revelation was made when Poca's first solo song came out. The writer of that song? Sakurako Kimino. Now before you start being like, oh my god, what the fuck? This isn't actually her grand return after many years. For those unaware, there was a stage play musical based on the Love Live series, and guess whose name was on the original draft? That's right, Kimino herself. And even earlier, she was responsible for the draft of Flame Sword Princess, the sets in a novel that was released 2 years ago. Yeah, starting from 2023, she would gradually make a return to the Love Live series, and it's this year she's returning with a major role. Now this is important. The staff section on the official Bluebird website lists Kimino as both the original concept and member text. You might be a bit confused on what that means, but it's essentially confirming that Kimino is not only writing the songs, but also the story in question being the character tweets, or member text. She now has a direct involvement in the series again, and the extent of it is something we don't know, but if we analyze what Bluebird has been doing, we can see traces of what Kimino may be attempting. And huge shoutouts to Secret Sauce for help with this video. They're the owner for the unofficial Bluebird Discord, and after seeing their tweet on Kimino, I decided to contact them for more info on the topic. What ensued was a very deep analysis on Kimino as a person and the impact they had in love life. For a lot of my love life videos, they've required research in the past to understand certain elements, and for this video in specific, it required researching outside my usual zones. I again have to give a shout out to Secret Sauce for helping with detailing what Muse actually did back then, since a lot of it wasn't archived the best. To give a refresher though, back when Love Life started, it was very bare bones. The aspects you've come to know about Love Life did not exist. No games, no anime, so they did what they could. Magazines, illustrations, short stories, these were the starting steps for Love Life. You'd get an illustration telling who this person was and why you should care about them. They had frequent voting to get fans engaged. It was very low key back then. I also have to mention how small Love Life was back then. When Muse's first single dropped, the sales were incredibly low, and part of it was because it had just started. They released it 2 months after Love Life began. Of course no one knows who you are. Why should I care about these really creepy anime 3D girls? Back then, it seemed pretty scattered, unfocused, like there wasn't a full plan. Character traits not being fully defined is one I directly go into in my Love Life timeline video, showcasing just how much they were experimenting and fucking around. The only content being vaguely who these characters are and the songs dropping starts to sound very familiar to what Bluebird is doing, but let's continue. Both Muse and Bluebird are starting out with huge connections to its fanbase. Muse used to have polls and voting to decide certain aspects of how the project would go. Who would get the focus in a single or be the main girl in the collab? While other groups also have a connection to their fans, such as Nijigasaki, which I've talked about extensively, Bluebird seems to be taking heavy inspiration from Muse's structure. In their first livestream, things were left incredibly up in the air for the type of content they were producing. Bluebird's future is being left in the hands of the fans on a level we haven't seen before since those Muse days. We even got an announcement on how Bluebird is going to appear on Dengekichi's Twitter, where the activities of Bluebird would be documented and allow input from the fans themselves. Again, this is echoing the days of Muse and early Love Life, just evolved to modern day aspects such as Twitter and social media. If you take into account that one of the original Love Life creators came back to handle Bluebird, the way they're approaching this seems to make sense. They're going small scale with this project, back to its roots, allowing for direct fan input, the very non-existent content compared to previous groups. They're playing it cautious. As I'm writing the script, they recently made an announcement video asking you, the fans, to submit song ideas for them to cover. We don't usually get that kind of power, and it's something to keep in mind as we see what Bluebird does next. And I know what many of you are probably questioning, is this a good thing? Well, let's continue with all the comparisons before I feel comfortable sharing my full thoughts. Secret Sauce mentioned a small point regarding Bluebird's live performances. It's been revealed that they're going to be doing free performances in certain locations in Japan, which is just another point to illustrate how small scale they're going. What caught my eye though was their comparison to Muse, stating that they remembered Muse doing something similar, small scale performances before their first live, but they weren't able to find evidence for it. I was intrigued though, so we both went around Love Life circles to find any proof these mini performances actually existed, and soon enough, we did. Shoutouts to this person on the r/LoveLife Discord. They provided the links so fast that it actually surprised me. In fact, they're so cool they get a TikTok edit made of them. Before Muse's first live, they had a mini performance event for each of their subunits. These were all hosted at the Akihabara Gamer store, in which they celebrate the release of their subunit singles, serving as a talk and gift distribution event. This matches up to how Bluebird is handling things, with them also having similar events with items and performances. Secret Sauce was even able to find an old blog post detailing Love Life events happening in 2011, and it details their first group event celebrating the release of their third single. This occurred a couple months before their first live, and also took place in Akihabara. This is not only just to show a little cool fun fact about Muse's history, but how Muse advertise themselves. Remember, no anime, no game, how do you advertise who you are? Well, spread yourself around. Little events here and there until you're able to go to bigger heights. For Muse's case, it was quite literally their only way of surviving. For Bluebird, it's more purposeful, and that's a very clear separation we need to make. If Bluebird really wanted to, they could self-advertise and promote themselves everywhere to an extent similar to other groups. But they're choosing to go down this path of this sort of underdog that will eventually rise up to the level of Muse or Aqours. That's not only the intention from a real-life perspective of how they're recreating it step by step, but also from a lore perspective. The story of Bluebird is one that has intrigued many fans, and part of it is because of its premise. School idols are extinct, or have died down immensely in the Bluebird universe, and it's heavily implied the story of Bluebird is having school idols rise back up. Muse and Aqours do exist in this universe, with Shion serving as a direct connection, being a fan of Umi. Ignoring how Bluebird contradicts every point in Love Live history, something I've gone into detail with, you can understand it from a writing and real life perspective. Some people have interpreted the premise as a commentary on the decline of Love Live and the school idol genre. Topics such as VTubers have taken over a lot of the idol sphere, and there's no real evidence for this section, but I felt it'd be worth mentioning since it is a topic that gets brought up from time to time, especially in recent conversations regarding what Love Live has been doing content-wise. Having this be the premise though allows Bluebird to be that shining light to rise to the top. Secret Sauce interpreted this premise as a soft reboot for the series, and you can see that with how it deliberately ignores other Love Live groups to push its narrative on school idols being extinct. Continuity hasn't been an important instrument in Love Live, but in most cases, they at least coexisted. Here though, Bluebird is purposely ignoring them for its story, and although you could totally piece it together, let's just focus on the intention here. And I'll insert this part here because Secret Sauce put it in their message, but Katori got mentioned in the Bluebird story as Chun-sensei, implying that she's a teacher now, which is just shaping him up to be the next Muse. Who knows? Although that would be cool, I won't know. Kimino's involvement with Bluebird paints a much clearer parallel than if she wasn't, and I hope you can see the similarities. They are not exactly the same bar for bar, but it's pretty clear when you take a look at how Muse was handled back then. As Secret Sauce states, it's a modern take on early Love Life, and it's here where we ask the big question. Is this good? I can go on and on about the reasons for this and that and the intentions behind this action and that action, but the most important part that matters is whether or not it's good or bad. Is this a good decision or a bad decision in the long run? We've seen what intention can do when it's overshadowed by the execution. For example, the way Aqours painted in the anime is meant to be in the shadows of Muse. That's purposeful, and the intention was to have the group themselves realize that and become their own group. However, some people took the intention at face value and just thought of Aqours and Muse's shadow. Womp womp. The way we advertise stuff is way different than it was in 2010, and you can't really recreate that unless you somewhat adapt to the times. Bluebird has opted to do Twitter posts to learn more about these characters instead of magazine pages, showing that they are keeping up with the times. The songs they release are on streaming services instead of being physical only. It's clear they're aware of how things should work. But is the core idea of what Bluebird is attempting enough to keep it alive? They are purposely limiting themselves and not taking advantage of the Love Life name to score extra points or even extra resources. Their first music video / single wasn't 3D animated, it wasn't even 2D animated, it was animated like a music video I'd make. That goes to show how small scale they're making this project. When going through many comments discussing Bluebird, many people understandably had mixed reactions to what they're doing. Of course, this is mainly coming from overseas fans, so we have a very different perspective compared to Japan fans most likely. The lack of direction and especially content was noticed immediately, with some fans being confused at what exactly was going on. I was even confused because I was expecting an actual content plan for what they were doing. It's weird. Analyzing what Love Life has been doing with all these videos has shown me that sometimes Love Live doesn't make the best decisions. Some decisions affect overseas fans, some decisions affect all the fans, and Love Live hasn't really been consistent for a while. You could say Layla was the last ordinary group in terms of how they started, but they have a much larger focus on the seiyus now, and Nijigasaki was behind them, which was anything but normal, so I guess Aqours was the last ordinary group. It's hard to pinpoint these events, but I feel with Bluebird's approach, I think they themselves have realized how far they traveled in each direction. They pushed heavily with the real life route, they pushed heavily with the virtual route, so it's not too far-fetched to assume that when Kimino came back, she thought it best to go back to the series' roots. It's a very safe move. While the other groups are still alive and doing their thing, Bluebird can take its time navigating the best course of action. They're not in the position of early Muse, where any bad decision can probably bankrupt them. Love Life is very stable, as far as we can tell. Because of the way they're going, it doesn't really matter whether or not this plan will work, because depending on what we, the fans, say, they'll make it work. Their plan isn't set in stone. The most they have are their character solos, so what happens next is up in the air, and that's both good and bad. We just gotta let them cook, guys. I can understand those that are a bit turned off by the purposeful lack of content, especially the casual overseas fans who haven't gotten much to eat. Going this far back to their roots in the year of 2025, where content was not plentiful, is certainly a decision, and makes me wonder if fans will stay invested enough to when stuff actually happens. If it worked for Love Life in 2010, I have no doubt it can work for Bluebird. But I'm not a business manager, I'm just a noodle. Actually, I am working on my business degree, so. I want to bring up Aqours really quickly because it represents a path that Bluebird could have gone, but deliberately chose not to. For those unaware, when Aqours first started, it was actually very similar to Muse. Poll voting, appearing in magazines, they actually had a ton of similarities in how they were advertised. There was one big difference though. They took advantage of their situation. Love Life was already established. Muse pushed them to the top, so when Aqours came around, they were kinda set. Of course, they still got hate, but in terms of production value, they were prepared. They got an anime announcement less than a year after they started. Their structure was very similar to Muse, but sped up in certain aspects to give them that bonus edge. In fact, looking at the timeline, Aqours took a bit more time than Muse to do subunit voting and releasing their singles. I guess they were able to take their time and make sure everything was top-notch, taking advantage of their situation. And I'd be stupid not to mention this. They no doubt took advantage of their situation in terms of their most popular rhythm game, Squaddle Festival. I've kept mentioning how important Squaddle Festival was to Love Life's popularity in Aqours as well. It may not have been the sole reason people got into Aqours, but I'll stand my ground saying that it was important. Aqours being introduced to Sif was very carefully calculated, having this big event to celebrate their introduction. In fact, thanks to tweets I found, Aqours was incorporated way earlier than I thought, giving them an extra boost to their popularity. And during that year, they reached over 30 million players worldwide, which no doubt helped spread Aqours' influence. Now, why am I saying all of this? Is this to glaze Aqours? Well, yes, but it shows a scenario in which a Love Live group takes heavy advantage of the circumstances it's put into. Aqours is the closest group to Muse in terms of how it started out, at least until Bluebird happened. Groups such as Liela didn't exactly go down the same path, but they still took advantage of the resources, getting a literal anime announcement just a few months after the project officially started, and getting a full anime music video. Bluebird is leaving itself vulnerable. It's not taking advantage of any aspects it can take advantage of, and it makes the series very genuine about how it's doing things. I mean, the games are dead, and there's nothing Love Life really has to help Bluebird. Anyway, it makes Bluebird genuine on a level that hasn't been seen in a long while. Not saying other groups don't have that, but to be this open about we don't know what the fuck we're doing, it's very direct and leaves interesting possibilities into Bluebird's future. I know most of us just want anime or want the games back. I do too, and maybe we can have it come back. Like I said, fan input is something that's heavily encouraged, and with Bluebird being the next main project, as it was announced at the Asia tour, it leaves more credibility to our feedback. Everywhere I go, I see comments talking about how they want the games back, the anime back, and how Love Life has fallen, other stuff. That's really well said. There is some truth to it, however, and Bluebird going down this path of restarting can maybe include a new anime and a new game. Things are very unclear, and as you can tell, a lot of this was speculation on my part in Secret Sauces. The potential for Bluebird is limitless as of right now, so instead of waiting for it to become what we want to be, how about we send them feedback and support them so they can eventually become what we want them to be? That was the original goal of Love Life, and this may be one of the few situations where we can have that same power that once was held all those years ago. The direction of Love Life is certainly one that is up in the air. It can quite possibly be forged into anything. It just depends whether or not we want them to do it in a certain way. As I end off this video, I hope you have a better idea of why Bluebird is the way it is, and what it can possibly be given time and direction. I don't know why I keep doing this. Many people have already brushed the series off because it doesn't have a lot they can engage with, and while I can understand that, come on, give it a chance. That's what people did with Love Life back when it started in 2010, and with Kimino returning, I think she also wants us to give the series a chance. Anyway, shouts to Secret Sauce for a ton of help with the video. Couldn't have done without you. And I really fuck for your Aki on my profile picture. Good taste.